Witajcie, tu Ula Kamińska i 30 000 dni. Zapraszam Was dzisiaj na wspaniałą rozmowę z niezwykłą osobą. Jest to dr Jill Bolte Taylor. Tą rozmowę z nią przeprowadziłam już ponad rok temu, jednak z różnych przyczyn dopiero teraz byłam w stanie opublikować ją tutaj na moim kanale. Zapraszam Was do wysłuchania. Jestem pewna, że będziecie mogli bardzo dużo wziąć z niej dla siebie. Rozmowa będzie dotyczyła najnowszej książki autorki, którą wydała w 2021 roku o tytule Whole Brain Living. Zapraszam.
If it's okay, I will introduce you now, and then I hope we'll dive in.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So welcome, it's Ula Kamińska and my 30,000 Days YouTube channel. Today I have the privilege to have as a guest Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor. Dr. Taylor is a neuroanatomist, and in 1996 she experienced a severe stroke in the left hemisphere of her brain, and she described this experience in the first TED Talk that ever went viral on the internet, which now has over 26 million views. She's the best-selling author of her book, My Stroke of Insight, and today we are going to talk about her new book that was just published 2 months ago, and the title of the book is Whole Brain Living, the Anatomy of Choice and the 4 Characters that drive our life. Dr. Taylor, welcome to my channel.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you. You talk about interesting things, so I'm excited.
Okay, so maybe I start with saying that I was watching some interviews before you published this second book, interviews with you, where you were saying something like, oh, I would publish my second book only if I would have something really new to say. And that's why when I heard that your second book is coming, I was so curious and so excited. It probably will take some time for this book to be published in Polish. I would like to ask you, maybe as a first thing, if you could please say something. What is the main novelty that your book is bringing to the world?
Thank you. I did mean it, that I had no intention of writing a second book until I had something really important to say. And I had after that TED Talk, over 300,000 people wrote to me and said, how do I find that deep inner peace? How do I get out of my left brain into my right brain without having a stroke in order to get there? And so I spent 8 years rebuilding my track way back to rebuild the left brain, with the agreement that with myself that I wouldn't let go of what I gained in the experience of just the right brain. But I didn't know how to tell people to go the other direction. How do you go from the left brain back to the right brain? I could describe it. I could share with you what it feels like. I could encourage you to, when you find yourself in these kinds of moments, acknowledge that that's it. But I did not have a roadmap. And then I was giving a presentation at a conference. And I said to the audience, I love talking about the brain in this day and age because people know about the amygdala and about the hippocampus, these structures inside of the brain. And then I said, but the fact of the matter is that we have 2 amygdala and 2 hippocampi. And there was an audible gasp in the room. And I thought to myself, that's it. That's the key. People know we have these 2 right and left thinking brains, but they don't realize we have a right and a left emotional brain. And that made everything unfold very easily. Because
so this is the anatomy of your 4 characters, what you just described.
Exactly. So the title of the book is Whole Brain Living, the Anatomy of Choice, and the 4 characters that drive our life. And it was like, once I had that insight into how communicated, everything unfolded. And I think it's a very easy and simple paradigm for people to understand and grasp, and to know that it's rooted in the anatomy of the brain makes it so that we all have it. And it becomes obvious and simple. So yeah, that's how I got here.
And I just will maybe do the little quote from your book, just one sentence. Getting to know them, which you meant 4 characters, getting to know them inside your brain is a ticket to freedom. Why is it so important to get to know these 4 characters that are, like you just explained, based on our anatomy of our brain?
Well, it's like if we don't, it's kind of like eating a cake. Okay, so if I just eat a cake and I enjoy the cake because it's all these different things put together, I appreciate the cake at a different level than if I actually know how the cook created the cake. Now, maybe a cake is a bad example. Maybe it's, but whatever it is, when I understand inside of my brain which characters, and once we go through the 4 characters, your audience members, they'll be able to recognize their 4 characters easily. But the power is knowing that we have the ability to then choose moment by moment, which character do we actually want to embody? So, and then we look at the relationships between these different characters. And of course, one of the characters that we all exhibit is our emotional pain from the past.
Yes.
And when I'm in that character, how do I get myself? Yeah, I can stay angry for days. I can hold resentment and a grudge for decades, but that's negative, energetic on my own self and on my own body. It's unhealthy for me. So how do I lift myself up out of that which is not bringing me health, and allow me to purposely choose to hook into the parts of me that are strong and healthy, so that I can live a strong and healthy life by choice?
So it's there are these 4 characters in us, and you repetitively saying in your book that these 4 characters are equally important, are equally expressing the authenticity of who we are. But what you just said, and when I was reading that book, I had obviously that impression as well, and from my own personal experience, that one of this character is the most trouble-making side of us. But what is also very...
That's a nice way of putting it.
I think most people experience that, especially when it's been triggered, then
yes,
it can just really go crazy and out of control. And you're also saying that then all other parts are just pushed away or cut off, and we feel like we don't have access to any other resources within us in that moment. So I would like to maybe explore this, but also what you're saying, and what is really interesting is that we could have the impression that, oh, so let's maybe try to get rid of this part then. Why not? And you also describing while you experienced stroke that it was a great feeling not to have this circuitry running in your brain. But then you're saying that it's also some deep value in this character as well. So maybe I would like to ask you if you could say something more about like great side of this character 2, which you call character 2, and
yes,
how to deal with this troubles making part of this character 2.
Yes. So character 2, when you look at the brain, we have emotional tissue in both of those hemispheres. And character 2 is, and these are actual subsets of cells. So they work together, they manifest certain skill sets, and they come out based on what their skill set is. And the emotion of character 2 that we're talking about is our emotion over the course of time, because the left brain has a past and a future. So it gives us a linearity of time. Well, the past is not right here, right now, and the future is not right here, right now. So these characters, character one, which is our logical, rational thinking character, and then the emotion of our past and our fear of the future, those are predominant groups of cells in that left hemisphere exhibiting a consciousness that actually is not in the present moment. So what the emotion does, though, is information comes in from our sensory systems, and it goes first into our emotional tissue. And we share the emotional tissue with all other mammals. They also have this emotional or limbic tissue. And then the difference between other mammals and the human is the addition of that thinking tissue on top. So what that means is we humans are feeling creatures who think instead of thinking creatures who feel. And that's really important because then the mere concept of cutting myself off from my emotions or not addressing my emotions or not feeling my emotions or not letting them run their natural circuit of a 90-second sequence is depriving myself at a core part of me, and it's just going to build up until it blows. So we absolutely have to address and feel. It's important to feel our feelings, but not make a lifestyle out of feeling our feelings, because otherwise we can get hooked into the negative loops of our negative emotions from our past or our fears of the future, and then life's no fun and we worry all the time and we don't feel like we're not good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So this little character 2 that we're talking about as the pain of our past, it actually brings in at a cellular level. All right, at a cellular level, brings information in from our sensory systems and then immediately steps out of the consciousness of the present moment and looks back at my past and says, what's coming in right here, right now? Have I ever had what I'm experiencing? Has it been a threat to me in the past?
Yeah.
So let's say when I was a little girl and I was 10 years old, I would ride my bike a lot. And there was a dog that would, if I went by this dog's house, it would chase me and nip at my ankles. And I was terrified of this dog because I thought it was going to bite me and hurt me. So now, all these decades later, every time I see a dog in the present moment that looks like that dog, I move into my automatic response is alarm, alarm, alert, alert. I don't feel safe. So I trigger the memory from the past, triggers my feeling in the present moment that I don't feel safe. Well, it's been 50 years since I had that bad experience with the dog, but it is ingrained and programmed in my little character 2 in order to protect me in the present moment based on my past experience. So even though that little character holds our pain, it relates to our trauma, it holds any trauma that we've had, and then compares the trauma to the present moment. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I not safe? And it's also a little group of cells in there for craving. So it is our ability to be addicted to a substance based on I have a craving that I want to desire, and I desire it, and I desire it, and I desire it, and I just pretty much desire it until another part of my character takes over, a different character, or I satisfy that desire, or I just shift myself away from that either through my rational character 1 character or the experience of the present moment, realizing these are just cells in my body experiencing a drive, a desire. Isn't that interesting that I'm capable of having a craving? So I'm observing that circuitry run in motion as opposed to I have a desire and therefore I'm going to act behaviorally to satisfy that desire, and I'm going to go back into an addiction. So just remembering everything we experience is cells in circuits, and we can choose to understand what's going on inside of our brain at the level of the anatomy and the cells. We don't have to just be, hang on for the ride and what the brain what passes through the brain is how we react.
Yeah. So you often also say in the book that when we are on the circuitry of this character too, it's very important for us, and you even repetitively saying just knowing that these are the three characters are there as well. So maybe this is the first rescue gate for us when we find ourselves caught up in this circuitry that is suffering so much. This just knowing yes. that these three other characters are there as well.
Yes.
And you also said another quote, we have the ability to interrupt the autonomic circuitry of our emotional reactivity. The next step is just to learn how to interrupt this autonomic reactivity. So how is it possible?
So so let's give an example. Let's say I was in a bad relationship and you're my best friend, and you really liked the guy I was dating and you thought he was a great guy and you're still friends with him. And that makes me really mad that you're still friends with my ex and that you still like him, right? And it's like, so, but I suppressed that, right? Because we're friends and I value our friendship. But for some reason, you know, we'll be out to dinner and then you'll say, oh yeah, and the other day I saw Dan and I just want to rage. You know, it's like, you know, I don't want to hear his name. I've still got stuff about him. I'm having my automatic response. And you're just like being an innocent person sharing with me about, you know, someone who you care about, who I've known. And it was like, you know, and so I'm just I feel the automaticness of my emotional reactivity. And so what I can do is, now the trigger is Dan, and I don't want to think about Dan because every time I think about Dan, it stimulates my emotional system, and then I have the physiological response to thinking about Dan and how he done me wrong and whatever, and you're just over there chatting away. But from the moment I think the thought that triggers that automatic emotional circuit, and then I run noradrenaline or adrenaline or whatever it is into my bloodstream and it floods through me and flushes out of me, that alone takes less than 90 seconds. So first of all, here you are, you trigger it, and you trigger it because I've got it out there for you to trigger, right? I haven't finished my work with Dan. And if I actually forgave myself, forgave Dan, moved on, created a narrative around that relationship that leaves me with gratitude that I actually had that experience. But no, I'm still in my little character too. I'm not happy. I'm not happy about Dan. Right. And so first of all, me just knowing that any emotional trigger I have takes less than 90 seconds, that helps. Because then it's like, okay, you know, every time I go out with you and we have lunch, I'm going to hear about Dan. And it's like, but just knowing that, it's like, okay, just observe, how do I feel when Dan comes up? I feel the automatic trigger. I'm observing myself having the Dan circuit loop. And I could also then get really angry at you, right? Because I need to, the little character two, it's like all the energy in the brain, all character 1, 3, and 4 go into character 2. And now it's hostile, it's angry, it's unhappy. I'm not happy about Dan. Now I'm not happy with you. Why is it you always have to bring up Dan? As long as you always have to bring up Dan, I'm not going to see you anymore. You're going to have to agree that, well, in our friendship, Dan doesn't exist anymore. And you're going, ooh, hit her trigger, right? So, first, me being aware that I've been triggered. My little character 2, my automatic response has been triggered. So what can I do about that? Well, I know that Dan's going to come up, and it's like I can actually use a different character. And when I see you or when I talk to you, I can say, sweetheart, I'm so glad to be with you, but can we not talk about Dan? I mean, it just still really hurts my feelings. And then I'm not happy with you. And you're saying, well, of course, Jill, of course, I don't want to, trigger all that stuff for you. And then we can, so I can deal with Dan in a responsible way in relationship with you. Or you can bring up Dan and then I'm in my character too, and I'm start raging at you. Why is it you always bring up Dan? It's like, damn it, can't we even have a lunch where we can just like have each other, so I'm a typical example, isn't it? So one is becoming aware of my triggers. Two, becoming aware that I have put the trigger out there for you. I haven't come to you with one of my other characters and said, this leaves me uncomfortable. I'd really not like to rather not talk about that. Or if I don't feel like I can bring it up first, then maybe once you first mention Dan, I can feel the reactivity come on and say, I find that I'm still really easily triggered by that subject. Can we not talk about him, for a few months? And so I can heal that wound and let other parts of my brain come in. But one is to really become aware of my own triggering. And then two, recognize my triggering is still cells and circuit. And I can observe that circuitry. I don't have to just jump on it and run and rage at you. And then three is say to myself, okay, when this does happen, what might I do instead? How might I protect myself? But me becoming aware of my own little character too, instead of just jumping into her skin and letting her take over and rage about Dan and rage about you. And then I'm harboring bad feelings about you. And well, I don't want to see her for lunch anymore because every time I'm with her and it's like, I can't get away from it. And I must start making up all this stuff inside of my head that pushes away. And that takes us right back to that dog example. Back when I was a little girl, there was a dog that looked like that tried to hurt me. And I have that registered. And so now I'm putting you, my good friend, who I enjoy the company of, in the category of Dan because Dan hurt me. And so I'm pushing away, always looking for a reason to say no and sabotage relationships. So the little character too, and figuring out, well, how do I nurture? How do I love my own little character too? And part of that is her recognizing she's not alone inside of my head. I've got three other characters in here, and they want to hold and nurture because they find that part of me as a part of me. They don't give all of our power to her, but she's the one that gets loud and can really push away and really say destructive things that can then hurt other people, sabotaging multiple relationships.
Yeah, so it sounds, even when you're saying now my little character too, it really reminds me, and it sounds similar for me. I don't know if you ever heard this concept of John Bradshaw of inner child. And this really sounds, and when I was reading your book, it's really reminded me of this child that is within us, and even you, like listening how you explain it. And this little child is basically really scared because he's so little in the world, and also is so dependent, doesn't have yet all these resources within that can support herself or himself while going through some difficulties. And if there is not any adult that would support and hold this space for this child, then it's really scared. And I think then whatever is reminding even a little bit that some situations from the past, then is getting really, really reactive. And what you just started saying, another part, short part from your book, knowing these four characters is not enough. We need to learn how to create relationships between them. I've been waiting all my life for this book. Gave me this explanation and understanding that I really can support and heal this wounded part that is within me just using my own resources. So how to create these relationships between these four characters?
A odpowiedź na to pytanie znajdziecie już w drugiej części rozmowy z dr Jill Bolte Taylor, która znajdzie się już wkrótce na moim kanale. A teraz ściskam Was bardzo serdecznie. Dziękuję za wysłuchanie. Do zobaczenia wkrótce.